Well, first of all, David Sandstrom, welcome to the Thrive Sister Thrive podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Stacy. I enjoy talking with you always.
Yes, I really, really appreciate your time. And we had a good time chatting on your podcast, and we'll get into that later. But I thought it would be great to do this episode because, I have visited with a lot. I have seen and visited many naturopathic doctors over the years for a variety of different things. And it's really a different experience than going to a regular MD.
That's right.
And they can help you in, I think, unique ways. And in really, it has always been a really wonderful experience for me. Very pleasant, very helpful, very non-threatening. And it's just, I think it's really well worth people knowing what a naturopath is and how that might fit into one's wellness team, I like to call it, and how that looks, how they go about doing that. So I think the first place to start for those listeners that don't know what naturopathic medicine is if you could explain a bit about what that is and what that looks like.
Sure, absolutely. When I talk to people, a lot of times people have never heard of naturopathy. They think, what is it? You're a neuropathic doctor? Was that something to do with the nervous system? Like, no, naturopathic. But
that's so funny.
So, it's important to people, for the most part, understand what it's like to go visit a doctor, right? We visit the MD. We go, we have some symptoms. He gives you 5 minutes, and then you walk out a prescription in hand. That's pretty much how it works. But it's very, very different with a naturopath. We use a whole different approach. So allopathic medicine, basically what they do is they treat the symptom that has the person. And a naturopath treats the person that has the illness. And there's two completely different approaches. So the A in allopathic medicine stands for opposite or opposed to. So if someone's asymptomatic, they have no symptoms. If somebody is an atheist, they don't believe in God. So allopathic medicine, that A means that they're opposed to your illness or disease. That's what they go after. And perfectly appropriate at certain times, right? In emergencies, absolutely. Yeah. That's where allopathic medicine shines. Get busted up in a car accident, roll me into the nearest emergency room, give me all the drugs and surgery you need to save my life.
Right.
Perfectly appropriate. Yep. But when it comes to long-term health challenges or when the emergency is over, you're generally served better by seeing a holistic or a naturopathic approach to your health and wellness. So anyway, I got a few stories here that I like to share, but I don't want, how much time do we have?
You know what? Don't worry about it. We've got plenty of time, so knock yourself out.
All right, real good. I'm an airline pilot. I've been flying professionally for the past 35 years. And after 9/11, just a quick story. After 9/11, we were very uneasy. Everybody was on edge about getting on the airplane. And most people know that we have air marshals. Not all the time, but they're there. And we had a couple of air marshals, and at the time they used to come up and do a briefing with the cockpit crew before the flight. And because everyone was on edge about the terrorist attacks, there was some discussion about, well, if you have a terrorist on board, maybe you can push the airplane up and down in wild gyrations and, maybe incapacitate the terrorists for a little bit. And then the engineers said, no, don't do that. Airliners are not designed to be flown that way. You could experience structural failure. Do not do that. So, but there was some talk about it at the time. And this guy says, hey, if we have a terrorist, I have a gun and I know how to use it. If we have a terrorist on board, none of this up and down stuff. Give me a stable platform and I'll take him out. I'm like, okay, great. Glad to have you. Glad you're on board. And then he goes on and he says, if we have a drunk on board, none of this up and down stuff. Give me a stable platform and I'll take him out. And I said, whoa. Time out. We don't shoot people for having too much to drink, okay? This is not appropriate.
Right.
His partner's like, yeah, he's a little overzealous. Okay, don't worry, I'll take care of him. Probably should have thrown him off the plane. But anyway, the same is true with allopathic medicine. Perfectly appropriate at times, but overkill in other times because drugs are potentized substances and useful, but can be potentially toxic. Every year, over 100,000 people die from properly prescribed medications. That's
properly
prescribed.
Exactly.
And that's a big deal, and that's not something you hear about. Now, to their defense, they save a lot of lives with drugs too, right?
Right.
But at the same time, we should be in charge of our health care, and we should take advice. As you said, we should have a team of healthcare providers. There should be an MD on your team or DO, but
Sure.
it's really a great idea to have a naturopath on your side as well. So naturopathy has 6 primary tenets. One is first, do no harm. We believe in the healing power of nature. We identify and treat the cause. Your doctor is a teacher. That's the what a doctor is a teacher. You treat the whole person, not just a single system or organ, right? And we focus on prevention. So, and again, we treat the person that has the illness, not the illness that has the person. So what a naturopath wants to do is come alongside the body's natural processes and encourage the body to do what it already knows how to do.
Right.
So,
right.
Anyway, I could talk a lot more about, a couple of those if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll get it. We'll definitely get into some of that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for that. I think that painted a very clear picture. I appreciate that because I know that is just not familiar to a whole lot of people. So, well, share a bit about. I'd love it if you could talk a bit about your journey, how you got into studying naturopathic medicine and then practicing naturopathic medicine and all of that. If you could share a bit about that.
Sure. I'll try to give you the short version. I could
Okay.
share a lot on that too. But I had my own share of health challenges. The first one was chronic sinusitis, and I went to the traditional ENT doctor, and they gave me all the traditional drugs, including prednisone, anti-inflammatories, and antibiotics, and all the arsenal that they have, and it didn't help me one bit. And then they wanted to do sinus surgery, and back then the internet was in its infancy, so I got on my dial-up connection, and I'm researching sinus surgery, and I found that there's a lot of blood. And they're very close to the optic nerve. You can go blind from that surgery, which you don't hear about. And I said, there's got to be a better way than this. So I called up a chiropractor that I'd been to, and the name of his practice was the Natural Medicine Center. And I called him up and I said, here's what's going on. Do you think you can help? He says, yeah, come on in. So he says to me, I don't even think you have sinus infections. I think you have food sensitivities. Let's eliminate some of the common offenders in the foods. Let's eliminate dairy and gluten. And let's clean up your gut. Let's get you back to a healthy gut microbiome because all those antibiotics you took have messed that up. So I did everything. Pilots are good at following directions. I did everything he told me to do. And 30 days later, I was a new person. I could breathe again. My sinus issues were over. I said, wow, I became a fan of natural health at that point in time.
I believe it.
And I've been a fan ever since. So my education, I went to the Trinity College of Natural Health, which is an online school. There's only a handful of states that actually license naturopaths. I'm not a licensed naturopath. Washington State is one. Baxter University up there is a really good school. I'm pretty sure New Hampshire is another.
That's where I'm at.
And I think Arizona is another. But anyway, there's only a handful of states. Most states do not license naturopaths. But you have people out there, men and women, with a lot of education that can give you some really, really good advice. And my focus is on holistic health. And there's a lot of different modalities to coming alongside the body's natural systems, but no one practitioner is going to do them all, right?
That's right.
So you got to find somebody that you're comfortable with and someone that you believe in what they do, and they can maybe perhaps give you some testimonials, give you some people to call and talk to, say, hey, what's it like going to see this guy or gal, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that you're comfortable with the approach, because there's a lot of different things. I mean, we could go on all afternoon about all the different ways people go about helping one another. But anyway, my focus is on holism.
So you studied, and then you opened. How did you end up practicing? I know did you open a clinic for a few years? I thought that's what you told me.
I had a brick and mortar office, and I saw patients for clients. We called them clients. I saw them for about 3 years. I did mostly nutritional counseling. And that was really before I got into the holism part of things. I got into holistic health, body, mind, and spirit, when I had my own bout with chronic Lyme disease. And the physical only wasn't enough. So I had to approach my mental, emotional state and the spiritual state. And the piece that came along with addressing those parts of a human being is what really helped me overcome Lyme disease.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. Yeah, Lyme disease, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big deal.
It takes a
So
holistic approach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you got through that okay, and that you bounced through it. Thank goodness, huh?
Yeah.
Can you tell me, in your experience, what are some of the, especially as it would relate to my audience, which is primarily women over 40, what are some of the more common health, challenges or issues that naturopathic doctors can help people with? And some of, I know there's a vast amount of different types of things they can help with, but maybe what are some of the more common ones that women over 40 might might experience? I know hormonally related things certainly is one of them.
Yeah. Balancing hormones, energy, chronic aches and pains, chronic infections, digestive issues, headaches, really almost anything that's not an emergency. Right. If you're having an emergency, if you're having a heart attack, you don't go see a naturopath. You don't see a homeopath.
Right.
You go to the emergency room. They will save your life.
Quickly.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But when the emergency is over, naturopathy, that's the way to go. So I could talk a little bit about what I do when I see a client now. I mean, I don't do a lot of clients these days because I really don't have an office. I'm focusing on the podcast, Natural Health Matters, and I have my book out. And that's where I'm trying to reach people today. But when you see a naturopath, there's a process that they should go through. And you want to look for this.
That was my next question.
Okay.
So I'm glad you're leading right on into
terrific.
that. So go ahead and explain what that visit looks like.
Excellent. So you're going to spend some time with that person. They should hopefully give you some detailed intake forms via an email, and you'll fill all those out before you show up, because it could take you an hour or more to fill out these forms properly if they're asking all the right questions. And so you have those filled out when you show up, and you're still going to probably see this person for 60, 90 minutes on the first visit, because they should do some probing. They should get to know you a little bit. They should get to understand how it is you came about to present the way you're presenting in the office that day. So it's going to take some time. And also what I do with clients is I have them fill out all their symptoms on a form, and then I have them rate those symptoms on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most acute, and then 1 being it's not a big deal at all, right? Because you want to save that in that person's file, because 2, 3, 4, 5 months down the road, they might have said, hey, my digestive problems, my gas and bloating after meals is an 8. It's really, it's pretty bad, pretty acute. And then you see them 4 or 5 months down the road and you say, how's the digestion going? What digestive issue? Well,
they forgot they even had it.
Right, they forgot they even had it, because when the body starts working right, you don't even notice, right?
Yeah.
Say, look, when you first came to me, you said it was an 8, and now you're telling me it's a 0. That's progress. That's real progress, and it's motivating when the person says, wow, that's right, I did say that, didn't I? Yeah, you did.
For sure.
So it's really pretty cool. And then, so I always start out with asking the people the obvious questions. Do they smoke? Do they do shift work where there's, working nights? How are they sleeping? Do they have any chemical exposure at work? One of the common places to get exposed to chemicals is in the beauty salon.
I bet.
Nails done.
Well, you walk into any nail salon and it just about bowls you over.
It's really, really toxic.
It's rough.
So beauticians are people that tend to end up in a naturopath's office because they've got all these mysterious symptoms that the doctors can't figure out, but it's toxic overload.
Yeah,
they've been doing hair coloring and all the chemicals that go along with that for years and years, and it builds up. So, you ask people those kinds of questions. How's their elimination? How often do they have a bowel movement? That's a pretty important part of a health building regimen as well. Ask them about their exercise. What do they do for recreation? What are their eating habits like? When you talk about eating habits, you don't just say to somebody, hey, how's your diet?
Right.
Because what do people say when you ask them that, Stacey?
Oh, it's fine.
Great.
It's good. I do well.
I do really good, right? Everyone thinks that, right?
Yeah.
So I'll ask them.
They want to believe it, even if they know it's not true.
Exactly. Yeah, even if they know, they're not going to admit, right? So no, I eat pretty good. I eat diet soda. I drink diet soda. Right? So what I ask them is, roundabout questions like, how many times do you eat out per week? Because generally speaking, when you're at a restaurant, that's a compromise, right?
Right.
If you didn't buy and prepare that food yourself, you're probably compromising in some way, shape, or form. And if somebody's telling me they eat out 10, 15 times a week, I know right then and there their diet needs work, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I ask people about traumatic events. You know, has been a death in your family? Has there been a divorce recently?
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you ask them these questions, you get into the details. Then you ask them, well, when did that symptom start? Well, it was 2 years ago. What was going on in your life 2 years ago? Well, that's when I got divorced.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even good things like, oh, I got married or we moved across the country, but it caused all kinds of stress.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times it's, you know, so it could be a traumatic thing or a super stressful positive thing, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah,
Stress
that's smart you asked.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, so that's what we want to do. We want to de-stress the body, right? So speaking of stress, what about finances? You know, how are your finances? Do you have any, do you run out of month before you run out of money? All the way around. Run out of money before you run out of money. So,
exactly.
that can be a tremendous stressor. How's your relationships? Do you have some friends that you call on a regular basis? You know, do you have somebody to talk to? And then, of course, if they're open to it, I talk about their faith as well. And then, of course, you know, after you collect all that data, you will likely order some appropriate labs. Naturopaths, they tend to be functional. So functional medicine means we're not just going to guess, we're going to test. We're going to try to order some appropriate labs based on the symptoms you're presenting. You know, you don't want to just run 20 different labs. It costs a fortune. So you want to, but the ones you'll probably run are some type of a stool sample to get an idea of what's going on inside the gut. Do you have any undesirable microscopic organisms like Giardia or H. pylori, those kinds of things? Those can be major blocking factors to your health and wellness. As you mentioned earlier, hormones and neurotransmitters, might want to test for that, serotonin levels, melatonin levels, and a huge one is cortisol.
Yes.
You want to know what's going on with someone's cortisol throughout the day. Our cortisol is supposed to spike in the morning, help us wake up, and it's supposed to peak out around noontime, and then taper off so we wind down and get some rest, you know, later in the evening. So you want to know what's going on, not just a single snapshot in the doctor's office, but you want to know what's going on throughout the day. So the best way to test for that is with saliva. It's pretty accurate.
Really? Okay.
And people do that at home.
Okay.
And then you put your teacher hat on. And then I start educating clients about, you know, okay, because generally when someone comes to see me, they are either tired of the side effects from the drugs or they're looking for a natural supplement that'll do what the drug does without the side effects, right?
Right.
And I have to explain to people, look, I believe in supplements. It's part of a health building program, but you're not going to find your health in a bottle of pills. If it was that easy, everybody would be healthy, right?
That's right.
But it's not that easy. So how do we do it? Well, we start unloading the body. We start reducing the burden, the load that your body has. And this is a great metaphor. I got this from a good friend of mine by the name of Bill Walcott. He wrote the book, The Metabolic Typing Diet. But it's a great metaphor. Think of your health as a 2x4 straddled across a couple of sawhorses. And if I started stacking bricks on top of my 2x4, you can easily handle a few bricks, no problem. Well, the bricks are the blocking factors to health. Sedentary lifestyle, secondhand smoke, staying up late, you know, the ice cream, the potato chips, you know. We all know what blocking factors look like.
Yeah.
Right? So if I keep stacking bricks on top of my 2x4, adding blocking factors, it's going to come a point where the 2x4 is going to start to sag, and then one more brick, and it'll eventually snap.
Right.
And that's the place where you've got a disease, some kind of diagnosis, right? So, question, was the problem the last brick? Or was the problem the total load of bricks underneath?
It's the total load.
Total load. That was the problem.
Yeah.
2x4 can handle a single brick, no problem. Same is true with our bodies. So we start unloading the body, make it easier for the body to do what it already knows. Pardon me. What it already knows how to do, and then health will follow. So getting back to your earlier question, what can a naturopath help you with? Well, almost anything, because our bodies know how to thrive. Health is our default setting. If you were preparing food and you cut your finger with a kitchen knife, it would start to bleed, but I don't have to tell my blood how to clot. I don't have to tell my skin how to heal and the body to dispatch enzymes and clotting factors and cholesterol to repair the laceration. It does that automatically. It's built into our design.
And it's fascinating, and it's really miraculous. And if we all have experienced that many times in our lives, and we just take it for granted. We don't really think it through. But if you think about how miraculous that is, that your body can just do that, why question the fact that it can heal itself in other ways too? Because that's a pretty complicated process that happens,
Absolutely.
But it's not the only one. That your body, like you said, it's capable of doing all kinds of, amazing stuff.
Things. Yeah. It's mind-blowing when you think about the complexity of what our bodies go through. I mean, if you've ever had a baby, do you have children, Stacey?
I do. I have a grown daughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
The process of procreation is absolutely mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling.
Isn't it?
Even when you go through it, it's still 100% mind-boggling. Yeah. And it's fascinating.
And how much conscious thought does the mom have to go through to make that baby?
Yeah, not much. It pretty much is just, nature taking its course.
Right.
Yeah.
Just wait it out, and it happens. So our bodies have this God-given built-in intelligence. We need to lean on that. And that's what a naturopath should lean on, is that God-given built-in intelligence. Whereas an MD, they look at things very differently. They kind of feel like, we've got this pretty much figured out at this point. It's just, if that drug's not helping, we've got to find the right drug. That's the approach. It's drastically different from the way a naturopath looks at things.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. The first time I went to see a naturopath, I was quite ill. I had some sort of thing happening. I was recovering from mono, but I didn't at the time, I didn't know how to rebuild my immune system. And so I basically, and the regular MDs couldn't tell me how to do that. They just said, wait it out. It could take several years, which wasn't acceptable to me. Yeah. So luckily I do live in Washington State, and I have Bastyr University in my backyard, and they have a clinic and so on and so forth. I ended up taking myself there and didn't know what to expect. And the first thing that, it was such a different appointment. I walked in there, I thought, I just expected it to be like any other medical appointment. You get in the gown and you sit down, and then they get out the thing to listen to you, and then they asked you a few. I just expected it to be like every other doctor visit. I didn't know. I just assumed they had different treatments, but that maybe the process was the same. But it was exactly what you said. They sat there. The amount of time they spent with me trying to understand more about me, and this has been with every naturopath I've seen since. It's like, it's such a joy to sit there and have somebody actually engage in conversation with you for an hour and really ask you questions about yourself and your life. And at first you kind of are taken aback, kind of like, well, what does this have to do with anything? But it has to do with everything, Right. And so that is such for anybody out there that has ever felt like, I get so sick of going to, like, even your gyno or your annual checkups or whatever, your doctor, and they don't spend any time with me. They don't listen. They don't ask me questions. I feel like I have to hurry up and tell them in 5 minutes, whatever it is I need to tell them, because they got to hurry up and get out of there and go to the next person, which, that's how their whole business is structured, unfortunately. If you ever feel that way, you feel like, I wish I just had a doctor that would listen to me and ask me questions and really get into the heart of things. You need to go see a naturopath, because that's how they do things. That's always been my experience. Exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. I've had them order labs where they send me to a nearby lab, and, they write up the order, and I go in and I get the lab work done and do a follow-up visit. And I'm assuming that's what you usually do, is you have follow-up visits. Yes. Depending on what the situation is. Absolutely. It dictates how many, right?
Yeah. Right.
And how often,
it takes
and
time.
all of that.
If you're really going to work on, the whole person, especially spirit, mind, body, it takes time to go through that. I kind of did. This is one of the mistakes I made when I first started my practice, is I would unload on people, and people would walk out of a 90-minute session just overwhelmed. Right.
They're like, where do I start?
What do I do now? Yeah. It's just not helpful. And it's not. Yeah. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's not helpful. So,
especially if you feel ill. You don't feel particularly well, Yeah,
absolutely. And that's one of the things a good practitioner will do as well. If they're a natural practitioner, there are supplements you can take that will help relieve symptoms. There's a time and a place for some symptom relief.
Sure.
Going back to the gas after you eat example, you can take some digestive enzymes and really improve that overnight. But at the same time, you want to rebuild your gut microbiome so that you don't need the enzymes, the supplemental enzymes, right?
Right.
You might stay on them. You might just really like them. But, it's just an example of what you can do with supplementation. And we call that allopathic nutrition. and
Oh, is
and
that
it's
right?
useful.
Okay, that's
That's
good
what
to
I
know.
call it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's basically treating the symptom, not the cause at that moment, but the client needs some relief.
Right.
And if they don't get some quick relief, they're going to be moving on to somebody else.
Right.
So that
Well,
can
and
happen.
naturopaths they do prescribe certain medications, but not drugs, correct? So they might be medications in terms of, like you said, supplements
Yes.
or creams or something that are natural, based, like the hormone, some of the hormone, the bioidentical hormone creams and such
Yeah,
like that.
but
But
they have to be over the
but
counter,
they don't
right?
prescribe drugs
Right.
per se,
They
right?
don't-
As far as I know.
Right. No, you have to go to an MD or a DO or a nurse practitioner for that.
Yeah.
But you know, an ND might recommend, prescribe it. We recommend. Might be some herbal supplements. Might be some essential oils. It might be some homeopathy. Very useful, especially for kids. Kids respond to homeopathy really well.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
I've used it off and on for allergies, seasonal allergies and stuff. There's something to that
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the-
It's hard to understand though. It's very hard to wrap your head around it, but yeah.
It is. Do you want me
It's,
to give a brief explanation as to
Yeah,
how?
I'd love it because that's another thing most people aren't familiar with, and it's a wonderful thing to know about.
Yeah.
So yeah,
A lot
that'd
of
be
people
great.
take the term homeopathy and they think it means natural, but
Yes.
that's really not what it means. A homeopathic remedy, homo means like, right? So it's the concept is like cures like. So let's say I went out into the woods and I found this leaf, and if I ate this leaf, it gave me a really bad headache, right? So the physical form of that substance, whatever the constituents were inside of that leaf, caused a headache in me. Well, if I take that same leaf and I soak it in an alcohol water solution for a couple of weeks, what's inside, the constituents in that leaf, will seep out into the alcohol water solution. This is how they start out with a homeopathic remedy. And then they take that's called the mother tincture. Then they take that tincture and dilute it 10 to 1. So it started out at 100%, then we dilute it 10 to 1. And then they succuss it. And they have machines that will kind of like vibrate and take the kinetic energy from the motion and put it into that product. So we take that 10 to 1 solution and dilute it 10 to 1 again. Now we have 100 to 1.
And the 100 being the properties of the leaf,
Right.
And then the 1 being, or the 1, is it one? Which way is it?
It would be
1 to 100.
100 to 1. You'd have a 1/100th of the mother tincture that you started
Okay,
with,
that's what I thought.
right?
All right.
So if you did it twice, you have 100 to 1. And then you go again, and it's 1,000 to 1. Again, and then it's 10,000 to 1. And they do it about, 30 or so times.
It's amazing.
So what you've got, the solution you've got left, the physical properties are just about nil. There's just about,
Right.
it's millions or even billions to parts to 1, right?
Okay.
So you've got nothing left from the physical substance, but because of the succussion, what you've got left is an energetic imprint of that substance. And the energetic imprint is what will bring the healing. So now that same leaf that gave me a headache, the homeopathic version, the energetic version of it, will relieve a headache.
Okay.
That's the way homeopathy works.
That's what it is. Because I have tried to read up on that multiple times, and I end up just as confused as before I started. That made a lot of sense to me. So thank you for that. It's and like I said, the one thing I think I've only ever used it, and I've used it many times. I'll probably use it again this spring. But there are times where the pollen gets pretty icky out there, and I have found that. If I use that, it does help tamper it takes the symptoms way down. And I know that now my understanding is with homeopathic medicine, you don't just take it, well, in most cases, if it's, I guess, a chronic condition, let's say that you're treating, like, say, seasonal allergies, for instance, you don't just take it one time and then that's it. Like you take it, as prescribed, whether it's multiple times a day or whatever. It's usually drops, right? Little drops that you can put in your mouth or your water or something.
Sublingually sometimes.
Oh, pellets, right? Pellets. And then what happens is as you take that more to, combat whatever symptoms it is you're dealing with, then eventually your body starts to recognize this thing as not being dangerous. And so therefore, that's the idea, right? So it's not... So hopefully at some point in time, it will stop causing the symptoms. Is that a correct?
Yeah, I think what
am
you're
I
describing
saying
is
that
building
right?
up a tolerance to that
Okay.
substance. But I don't think homeopathy would really work that way because you're dealing with
Okay.
energetic imprints. And
Yeah.
you could do that. What an allergist would work that way. They would expose you
Yeah.
to a very small part of the physical substance, and they only work with the
Okay.
physical. They don't.
Okay.
They completely reject the energetic. They just don't even believe in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But a homeopath knows the difference, and just I'll give you a couple of examples of energy.
Yeah.
Right now we've got the football playoffs going on, right? And you'll see the announcers on the field. The stadium is electric. You can feel the energy down here. And it's true, they can. When you
Yeah, they
get
can.
80,000 fans all pumped up about their team, that collective energy can literally be felt.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
It's real. And another one, if two people were having a heated argument in a room, you didn't hear anything, but you walked into the room in a moment of silence, could you sense that they were fighting?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, most people can,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You'll feel
Yeah.
that negative energy in the room,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So energy is real. It's quantum physical. And,
Yeah.
a lot of, I'm a Bible believing Christian, and a lot of my Christian friends will say, oh, that's voodoo medicine. I'm not going to do anything about this quantum physical. Oh, so you don't believe in quantum physical energy? Do you turn on your FM radio?
Right.
Okay, because
right.
that
How does
energy is
work?
flying through the air invisibly. Your antenna picks it up and reproduces it into a music in a song. That's quantum physics,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
it's part of God's design. It's nothing to be afraid of.
It's no, absolutely not.
And
Yeah.
And all homeopathics are completely non-toxic. You can give them to babies. There's no toxicity to any homeopathic remedy.
Yeah. So as long as you have the symptoms, you would continue to take it. In other words, if you want to utilize it that way. In other words, it's not something like you're like, well, I'll take this for 3 months and then I'll never have that issue again. That's not how it works. It's more like if you're having the issue, you take it. It helps
Yeah.
you in that moment
More like
with
relief.
that issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's
Okay.
temporary, but powerful.
Yes.
So now, if you have an allergies, that's a whole other conversation. We have to have a whole new podcast.
Sure. Yeah.
on
Well,
that.
we won't. It's a whole other rabbit
whole
hole.
other
Yeah.
conversation. But
Yeah.
part of what brings on a lot of autoimmune and allergies is gut dysbiosis. When you start absorbing larger proteins from the food that you're eating than your bloodstream is capable of handling, that can bring on issues. So you work on restoring function. That's what a functional practitioner is all about. And then hopefully the symptoms will just disappear on their own when you
Right.
fix the root cause.
Right. Right. Okay. Do you know? And I know this is going to be different from state to state, but and I know in Washington State where I'm at, there are several that do. But what's your experience with insurance companies and naturopathic services, doctors or naturopathic? Whether it's consults and things like that. Does insurance, is it recognizing that more and more these days? I know everybody's insurance is going to be different.
To the best of my knowledge, no. Insurance will not
No.
pay.
So it's usually something you have to pay for out of
it's
pocket.
usually out of pocket.
Yeah.
And here's what I tell people. Yes, it's going to cost more than your traditional practitioner. But if you want to do something different, you want different results, you've got to do it differently.
That's right.
We've all heard the cliche, doing something. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right?
Absolutely.
So we don't want to
yeah.
don't want to go there. So if we want to have a different outcome, we've got to do things differently. And unfortunately, the doctors are kind of trapped in that medical insurance paradigm. There's not a lot they can do about it. And the medical system, the medical insurance, is only going to pay for approved procedures and diagnoses and those kinds of things. And when it comes to naturopathy, they don't go there. So it's going to be out of pocket. But over time, when you build health from the inside out, you'll have less need to see the practitioner, right? As you get educated yourself and you start practicing a natural health lifestyle, the body starts working the way it's designed to work. You have fewer and fewer visits to the practitioner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and like I said, you can't even compare the experience between the two by going to see a naturopathic doctor versus going to see any other type of MD. I don't even care whether they're a specialist or not or whatever, but it's just very different.
Right.
And I think everybody should everybody should at least go once and see, because once you do, you'll be like, okay, this is a very different approach. And I think there's, I think probably 95%, if not more, of the people that go in there will walk out feeling like, this is what I need to do.
Yes.
I need to go down this road. What is your experience? In my experience, it is easier in terms of trying to share between your doctors, your naturopathic doctors and your MD or MDs, depending on your situation, trying to keep everybody on the same page, trying to integrate the two. It is my experience that most naturopaths are far more open to embracing what somebody is doing with their MD and the kind of treatments that they're working on with those MDs, and trying to be not dismissive of it, where sometimes it can, there's times where you're talking to one of your MDs about maybe your naturopath, and you don't always get that same level of respect, and such. Yeah. I mean, what is your experience with that?
Well, that's quite common, right? They have their education. They're so educated, MDs, that the education ends up getting in the way. They have one way of doing things. This is the way they've been taught. And by the way, their licensing boards require them to practice medicine in a certain fashion. Someone comes in with this, they get that diagnosis. You start them out on a pharmaceutical, and that doesn't work, you go to B, C, and if that doesn't work, you go to surgery. And that's the way their medical boards and their licensing boards require them to operate. It's very difficult for an MD to break outside of that. Now, some do, and if you can find one, awesome. Go to that practitioner. They're great. But it's a rare find, so you're probably going to have a different practitioner. Now, as far as them working together, you're the go-between, right? You as an individual should be responsible for your own health, and look at all the practitioners as people that give advice, right?
Right.
Attorneys give advice, they don't give orders, but doctors give orders. It's kind of strange,
It is.
So we should drop that and say, okay, I'm going to listen to them and use their services when they're appropriate, and I'm going to listen to this nutritionist or this naturopath or this chiropractor or the homeopath when appropriate, and decide for ourselves, and trust our instincts, our intuition as to what is the best path for me. So you can. I believe that the medical system and naturopathy can coexist. We both are on the same team as far as we both want health, and I don't want to, the doctors and nurses and emergency room staff, they're doing heroic jobs. They really are.
Sure.
I mean, I smashed my foot on a ladder fall that I needed a surgeon for, and I thank God I got a good surgeon that rebuilt my heel. I mean, they do a lot of good. Okay, but we have to know when to use them and when not to.
Right.
So, it's tough to blend the two, though. It really is. Yeah,
it is. And I think we have to, like you said, you have to advocate for yourself first and foremost. Yes. And remember that doctors, regardless of what kind of doctor they are, how educated they are just humans like us. And we need to know that they are not, although they may be right often, they are not always right 100% of the time. And you have to think things through for yourself and look at all the angles, and not be afraid to do that. It's your right. It's your body. It's your life, and like you said, sometimes some doctors can come off, and it probably comes from a really good place, barking orders and things like that. And that's but that doesn't mean that what they're saying to you is 100% of the time the right thing for you. It just, it probably is a lot of the time, and sometimes it probably isn't. And you have to really use your own head and think through the whole thing.
Absolutely.
I was so impressed, just on that note, quickly, a quick story, but years ago I worked for a company, and there was a gentleman that worked there. He kind of worked alongside me, but he got really ill with cancer. He was in his 40s, I think, at the time. And he came down because of the leukemia is what it was. And because of that, he had a whole host of other things going wrong with him, as you can imagine, organ failures and things like that. And this guy was, well, not only incredibly tough, like he was just a tough cookie, but he educated him. I couldn't believe how educated he was about what was going on with his body. And I can guarantee you that he didn't get all that information from the doctors that were treating him.
Right.
This guy made it his business. He lived probably 2 or 3 years longer than most people would have, only because, I'm sure, because he made a point to really get in the mud with this thing and educate himself about what was happening so he could make decisions appropriately along the way. And he was in and out of the hospital a lot and all these things, but he had young kids and he wanted to try to, hang in there as long as he could. And the fact that I just would talk to him about some of these things, and I thought, how do you know all this stuff? Like, it was technical stuff.
Yeah.
And he just made it his business to learn. He wasn't a doctor, and so I think I was so impressed. That left a mark on me. I was like, wow, that's good
a
for
cool
him.
story. It really is.
Yeah.
We're living in the information age, right? And there are lots of resources available to people.
Yeah.
Here's one that I want to mention. You should be careful when you're on medications. Again, perfectly appropriate at times. But all medications have some side effects. And they call them side effects, but they're direct effects of taking that medication.
Yeah.
There's a website called RX List. It's put together by WebMD. It's a medical website, and they put all the information that was published from the clinical trial for that pharmaceutical, what the side effects were, and then the follow-up. Even after a drug is FDA approved, they still continue to monitor drugs, and occasionally a drug has to be pulled off the market because even after the clinical trial was concluded, they didn't know all the impact it was going to have. So that happens once in a while. So RX List, the letter R, letter X, list.com. You can read up on everything about that drug. Quick story.
Okay.
My mom is 89 years old. God bless her soul. She lives alone still. She's doing okay, all right, for a 90-year-old gal. But she's on several meds, and we call this polypharmacy. You have one side effect, and then they prescribe another drug to relieve that side effect, and the new drug has its own side effects, and we get this polypharmacy going on. So she was on something like 8 different meds, and she has irritable bowel, and a lot of times she'll have diarrhea. And I looked up, I researched each one of her meds on RX List, and 7 out of the 8, one of the primary side effects was diarrhea.
Oh, my goodness.
So I went into her doctor's office with her one day, this is not too long ago, and I said, Doc, is it possible that her diarrhea could be a side effect from the medication? Well, where'd you hear that? So, well, I went to RX List, and I read up on these meds. Oh, don't pay any attention to that.
Oh.
That's all we got.
My goodness.
No, it couldn't be that. But it says it's a primary side effect from taking this medication, and that's 7 out of the 8 meds she's on.
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't pay any attention to that. That's not the problem.
Oh, no.
And again.
Oh, see, that's why you have to you have to learn about the things that are going on with you and the things, like you said, the medications you take and all of that. So RX List, that's awesome. Thank you. I'll put that in the show notes, a link to that in the show notes, because I did not know about that. So that's very helpful.
It's useful.
Do you, absolutely. So do you feel like, it's beneficial for most people? Say, like middle-aged folks and older, at least. I know when you're in your 20s or 30s, it's probably not as applicable necessarily. But as we get older and we start to have more things to, deal with and think about, do you feel like it's beneficial for most people, especially if we're talking about women over 40 and the kinds of things that we tend to deal with regularly, that's common for us to deal with as we age? Do you feel like it's really a good idea for everyone to have a naturopathic doctor on their wellness team, or do you think it fits more specifically to, people dealing with certain things? How do you look at that?
I think anybody can benefit, for sure.
Yeah.
Because when you learn how to build health from the inside out, it can take care of almost anything. It's not going to. I guess I was going to say it's not going to fix a broken leg, but actually it could make your healing journey more quick and more efficient.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there's emergency care, and there's long-term care that naturopathy is really, really effective with. So almost anything. And I wanted to mention one more thing about blending the MD and the naturopath together as 2 team members on your same team. And that is, a naturopath is not going to give you advice on your medications. They're not legally allowed to. Right?
Okay.
You have to have that discussion with your prescriber. So as your health improves, as you're moving along on your health journey, let's say you're a diabetic, The naturopath is not going to treat your diabetes, but he might be able, or she might be able to help you with your nutrition such that you decrease or lower your need for the diabetes medication. So you have that discussion with your prescriber and say, hey, doc, I've been monitoring my glucose levels, and they're really going lower than they were a few months ago. What do you think about lowering my dose? That's a great conversation to have with your prescriber.
Sure. Because they can easily take a look at your levels and figure out, and they're probably going to ask you, what are you doing? Why is this changing? And like you said, diet, it can definitely make that happen.
Absolutely.
So if you're going to make a drastic change to your diet and you are on that type of medication, or even I think like high blood pressure medicine, probably, these are problems that can be oftentimes resolved or at least partially resolved by changing your diet drastically. So you need to be keeping an eye. You don't want to get lightheaded and pass out because now you're eating so well and you're doing so well that now your medication's too high for what you now need. So it's good idea to keep them in the loop when you're doing that kind of stuff.
You have to.
Yeah. And if it's stuff you can monitor at home, which I guess you can with your blood pressure and your glucose and stuff, that's at least helpful too, I guess.
And then some things are going to be regular lab work, right? Regular blood work.
Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah. And I don't think it's unusual for them to, like you said, pull, for women that are going through perimenopause and menopause and that sort of thing, to pull lab work to take a look at hormones and that sort of thing sometimes. But, honestly, there's been, my naturopath that I see occasionally now, I've gone to him for that. And because it wasn't anything drastic, he didn't feel like anything was way out of whack. It was just some mild symptoms that he thought, we can probably deal with this with, this, that, or the other. And so he didn't pull labs because what he was prescribing me was so, it was just such a low level of whatever it was.
Yeah.
And, that it wasn't potentially dangerous or anything like that. But I know that they oftentimes will order labs for that kind of stuff as well. Or if you, like you said, you change your diet and now they want to, I changed my diet several years back to a whole food plant-based diet. And so when I saw him, it had been about a year or two since I'd made that change, maybe a full year. And so he thought, he said, well, and when's the last time you had, all your, your vitamin levels and your D and your protein and all these things checked out? And I said, well, it's been a while, but I feel great. And he's like, well, you're probably doing great. But he said, let's just check them, cholesterol and all the things. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And they came back and they were, great. And he's just like,
Excellent.
Well, you're doing it the right way, apparently, because you're getting enough of everything. So,
Excellent.
But that was kind of, good of him to be concerned and just be like, let's check it. There's no harm in that. So, well, that is all super helpful. And now I want to share, is there anything else you want to say on any of that front before we kind of move on? Because I want you to share a bit about some of the stuff you're doing in the world.
Well, if we have time,
is there any final?
I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what holistic health really looks like.
Sure. Let's do it.
It's my contention that we maximize our health potential when we align our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. So what does that natural design look like? Another quick story. When you're learning how to fly, I used to be a flight instructor. On flight lesson 1, you teach students this, and that is aviate, navigate, communicate. 3 things. Aviate, fly the airplane. Keep the shiny side up and the greasy side down. Navigate.
Good advice.
Know where you are. Know where you are, know where you're going. Navigation. And then communicate, talk with the other crew members, talk with air traffic control. If you do those 3 things well, you'll go a long way towards maintaining your safety margin. Of course, there's a lot more to flying an airplane than that. But those 3 things, if you practice those, and believe me, 35 years as an airline pilot, we use that every day on the line when we're flying. So the same is true with our health. There's 3 parts to human beings. We are spirit, we have a mind, and we live in a body. And I believe that if we focus on 3 focus areas, and each one of those will go a long way towards building health. So body, the 3 focus areas will be, I come up with a kind of a memory mnemonic here. It's food, move, and snooze. Right? So food is nutrition. Eat food as close to its God-given natural form as possible. Get away from the processed food. because we can say a lot more on this, each one of these. We could have a whole podcast episode in all 9
on
of
each
these,
one of
right?
them. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
move. So you want to not only go to the gym a couple times a week, that's good, but incorporate movement into your days every day. You know, park at the furthest spot away in the parking lot and walk into the store. Find creative ways to get some movement going. Walk up and down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Those kinds of things over time will have a cumulative effect. Also, you want to get your lymph fluid moving. And lymph only moves through muscle contraction. We don't have a heart that pumps the lymph fluid. So it moves through one-way check valves and through muscle contraction. So we've got to keep our bodies moving so that our lymph fluid gets moving, and which, by the way, is very important to our immune systems, because white blood cells that go after viruses and those types of things are made in the bone marrow, and then they're transported through the lymph. And if we don't have our lymph fluid moving, we're compromising our immune. Also, our digestive system, got to keep things moving there too. You know, we want to process the food, extract the nutrients we can, and then eliminate. We don't want to be clogged up because we're going to be reabsorbing toxins that we don't need to deal with. Again, we'll be building our total body load in the wrong direction if we're not eliminating properly.
Right.
And then the last one, snooze, sleep. Think of sleep as a nutrient, because it is.
Yes,
all kinds of important bodily processes happen when we're sleeping. If you're not sleeping well, that needs to be addressed. That's a big deal. There's homeopathy you can do. There's routines that you can set up, blackout curtains in the room. There's a lot of things you can do to improve sleep. Again, we could spend a whole podcast on sleep alone.
Yeah, I did a whole podcast on that, and I know you have too. So if you're interested in that specifically, go check out both our podcasts.
Okay.
Look for that. Look for the sleep. Look for the sleep episode. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
so
it's important.
I know we're kind of pressed for time here, but for the mental, emotional, the mind, we've got to start acting like an MVP. Most people think that means most valuable player. No, it doesn't. What it really means is mindset. We want to develop a winning mindset. We want to have victory over our limiting beliefs. That's a big deal. And P, practice emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. So the mindset, we've got to get clear on our why. If we don't know why we want to get well, when we're tempted to cheat and we're tempted not to do the exercise or whatever it is, if we don't know why we want to get well, that's going to be a severe stumbling block for us. It's important to have the right mindset. Limiting beliefs, big deal, right? We all know about the placebo effect, right? So if someone takes a sugar pill in a clinical trial and they think this is going to help them get over their knee pain, and they get over their knee pain just because they believed that it would help.
Yeah.
And
that it's incredible.
It's amazing. And about 30% of the time, there is a placebo effect there. About a third of the time. That's an amazing number. And there's also something called the nocebo effect. Let's say you're taking you're in a clinical trial and you're taking a sugar pill, but they told you one of the side effects from this medicine is losing your hair. Well, guess what? Some of the people that take the sugar pill lose their hair. So
I don't doubt it.
What's going on inside of our minds is important. So the body is so complex and we're so interconnected that what affects one part of our being will by necessity alter the others for good or bad. It's a big deal. And then practice emotional intelligence for P. And emotional intelligence is, we got to understand that we all have a limited capacity to hold emotions. And most of us are filled up with junk, anger, fear, resentment, bitterness. And our cups are so full that we have very little room for positive emotions. And then when we get pushed and we get stressed, guess what spills out of our cup is all that junk, right?
Yeah.
And most of what people find themselves in a counselor's office over, for marriage counseling or whatever, is the junk spilling out the top. If you can address the toxic emotions that are filling your cup, the symptoms just go away on their own. And
what is that saying? Our issues are in our tissues. It's so true. It's like stored in our body, and it causes all these problems.
That's right. If we're carrying mental stress like anger or rage or bitterness, we don't call those toxic emotions for nothing. There's a connection there. And I believe those emotions actually literally help us retain toxins. We don't eliminate toxins as efficiently when we're burdened with all that junk. So that needs to be
that makes sense.
addressed as far as a total health building program.
Yeah.
And then the spirit is all about loving relationships. Now, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I believe in God, but it's your love relationship with God. And if that's not your thing, you can be a higher power or the universe or something. But we all want to be a part of something larger than ourselves.
Larger than ourselves,
so it's that love relationship. It's our loving relationship with one another. All kinds of medical research, published medical research about loneliness and how dangerous that is for all-cause mortality. You know, when a spouse loses their spouse of 30, 40, 50 years, a lot of times they develop health issues immediately thereafter or, very shortly after.
I know.
Or they even die. You know, loneliness is a massive risk factor for all kinds of disease. So loving relationships with other people, huge. You know, they talk about the blue zones where people live to be 100, Okinawa, Japan.
Yeah, Dan Buettner's work. Yeah.
So they go down there and they do the research. It's like, yeah, but there's no real pattern here. These people are eating vegetables. These Eskimos are eating, fat and protein, high amounts of cholesterol, but they're still living to amazingly ripe old ages. But the one thing that the blue zones have in common is connectedness in a community.
Yeah.
They have relational connectedness. It's big. It's a big deal.
It is big. And I think, I hope that one thing positive that comes out of the last 2 years with this pandemic is that people more than ever realize how important their connection to other human beings in person as much as possible, but just in general is, because I think it was so exaggerated for so many people these last couple of years, being so disconnected and lonely, far more than they ever had been.
Yep.
That hopefully that heightened our awareness, like, I need other people in my life, and so let's hope, fingers crossed, that stays with folks.
Excellent. I'm glad you brought that up because it's really just kind of in our face right now how important that connectedness is. And I really don't like this term social distancing.
Oh, that's a rough one.
Why don't they call it physical distancing?
Right.
Not social.
Right,
you don't want
that's
to
what
isolate
it is.
yourself. That's not good. That's not good for anybody. Physical distance may be appropriate from time to time. We can have a discussion about mask wearing. Be a little bit controversial, probably. But, physical distancing, not social distancing. If you have to get on a Zoom call, do it. Pick up the phone, do it. Write a letter to an old friend.
Be social.
Be social. Do not socially distance. That's a bad term.
Yeah. That is a bad it's one of a lot of bad terms they've chosen to talk around this whole thing, unfortunately, and confuse people and really, but that is, I never even thought of that, and you are 1,000% right. I think that is bad messaging right there, but because physical distancing is what they're after. And so let's call it what it is. Right? Yeah. Wow.
And then one last, I'm sorry, Stacey, but one last
no,
thing.
go ahead, please.
So the last part of the spiritual is love for ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
It's about self-care. It's about getting rid of any form of self-loathing. And you know what? That sounds like, oh, yeah, that's for the other person. But you know what? I think to some degree we all do it.
Probably.
Who likes the sound of their own voice, right? Who looks in the mirror and says, "Oh man, I am looking good today," right? Who does that?
Right. No, we usually beat ourselves up somehow or another.
We're looking for the imperfections. We're like, "Oh man, do I have a big nose?" It's like, no, you got to get over that. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, and there is nothing wrong with that. Self-love is a huge deal as well, and that all translates into enhanced physical vitality.
Right. Wow, isn't that? It is amazing. It is amazing, and now that, thank goodness, people like yourself and me and a whole bunch of other folks in the world are trying to really share that message about the connection, the mind-body connection, and all, like you said, the spiritual side, all the things, are just. It all matters, and how we deal with our emotions, or if we don't deal with it, which is so common these days because people distract themselves in 8 million different ways when they don't want to feel their feelings. It's easy to distract yourself, and it's so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy, and I can't say I've never done it or don't. I catch myself when I do it now, but I'm human, and I've caught myself like, oh, I just feel I'm so frustrated. I'm just going to go do this fun thing right now. Maybe I should take 2 or 3 minutes just to like think, feel the feeling of frustration. Then I can let it go and I can move on. But instead of just kind of, you just quickly move on. You don't even think about it. It happens to all of us. So it's just having that awareness around it for sure.
A lot of eating issues actually are mental emotional issues, and that's the root. That's what needs to be addressed. If you sit down with eating the whole bag of chips, the whole pint of ice cream, it might not be just the craving. It might be something going on underneath the hood.
Yeah, it can be an incredible distraction from what's ailing you, for sure. Yep. It's much more pleasant to sit and eat something yummy, if that's your thing. And then there's the people who, if they're really upset, they can't eat or they don't eat at all. Too. It goes one way or the other, But well, what I would love to have you because you've got a couple cool things that you're doing. So you've got your podcast. You mentioned it earlier, Natural Health Matters. So can you tell the listeners what kind of topics you talk about over there so they can check you out?
Basically, I address health as we've been talking about today. I thank you for having me on, Stacey, because this is right up my
it's been
alley,
such a pleasure.
Address health holistically and naturally. And again, it's my contention that we maximize our health potential by aligning our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. And when we maximize our health potential, that's how we look and feel our best, right? Everyone wants to look and feel the best they can. We're all born with a set of genetics. We all have an age. The clock is ticking. Time waits for nobody. But we want to feel the best we can. Right, so that's my approach to health, and that's why I wrote the book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health. That's available on Amazon and paperback, Kindle, and Audible. And
wonderful.
My podcast, Natural Health Matters. I have guests on as yourself. I have people like you on. By the way,
that was really fun.
Check out the interview I had with Stacey. It's one of the most downloaded episodes. So,
oh my
good
goodness,
job,
that's
Stacey.
exciting.
You're really doing
thank
great
you.
work. And
thank you.
That's what I'm about promoting these days.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, be sure everyone check that out because he covers all kinds of interesting topics over there on his podcast. And be sure and check out the book. I love that you put it on Audible as well. That was super smart because there's just so many people now that's the way they prefer to go. In fact, I do most of the time.
I sell more Audible than anything else.
I bet you do. Yeah. I bet you do, because then you can just listen to it as you're going about whatever else you're doing in a day. So, and the last thing is I want to find out what is the best place for people to connect with you. Do you have a social place a social platform that you prefer?
Well, my social presence at the moment is a little lacking, but I am. I'm creating my YouTube channel. It's up and running, and I'm just starting to add some content there now. And it's David Sandstrom Health. So David Sandstrom Health on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
Okay, and the website what is the website?
DavidSandstrom.com.
Okay, and you have a contact form or something over there, I'm assuming.
And you can always send me an email, david@davidsandstrom.com. I will reply personally. And it's DavidSandstrom, as in Mike.
.com. So I will put links to all that in the show notes for folks. And, I appreciate you being here. This was so much fun. I think that this is going to be really helpful to a lot of people. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Stacey. I enjoyed it.